Now we have Quentin. I can spell it like this. I asked. And we have harder, better, faster, stronger authentication with OpenID Connect. I'm curious. Stage is yours.
Hey everyone. So my name is Quentin, but I'm fine with Quentin. My English-speaking colleagues usually call me that. I'm a backend engineer at Elements, and today I want to give you an overview of the next-gen authentication stack for Matrix, so what we've been working on this front. So that you understand what we're talking here, I want to take the steps of a new user trying out Elements to create a new Matrix account on matrix.org. So this is, this might be a distant memory for some of you, but here's just an overview of how it looks like currently. So I'm gonna head out on app.element.io. I click on create account. I'm gonna ignore for now the SSL logins I'm presented to because I want to just use a classic account, username and password. So I'll type out my username, and my browser is being helpful here by suggesting me to use a strong password and save it for me. So I'm going to use that, type out my email, and click register. Then I'm greeted with this CAPTCHA challenge. You might notice that the CAPTCHA is giving me an error message under it. I'm just going to ignore it for now. I click on the checkbox, and okay, the CAPTCHA is asking me to see what's the bicycle on the image. I'm going to do that, click verify, and this time the CAPTCHA is being really annoying with me. I don't really know why, but still. I'm going to continue, and I'm greeted with the next step through the registration, which asks me to verify the terms of condition. I'm not going to bother read that, I'm just going to click check. And after that, Elements tells me, you should check your emails. You've just got an email and we need to verify your email address. So I'm going to pull out my email client. I get this email. This email is talking about Matrix. Maybe I'm not sure what it is, but it's fine. I'm just going to click the link. It opens this window. This window says, you can now close this window, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to close my email, close this window, and okay, that's it. I'm logged in on my brand new Element account. So how did we end up here? So I'm going to introduce you a big part of the Matrix client to server spec talks about user interactive authentication. The goal of UIA is basically to protect any sensitive operation. So things like deactivating my account, changing my passwords, adding email addresses. It's a bit of a step-up authentication mechanism. It's also made to be very dynamic. You can have multiple stages during the authentication, like the CAPTCHA stage, the terms of service stages we saw before. And it's the server deciding what steps the client should display. The other nice property of this mechanism is that each step can be defined in the spec, meaning that each step can be natively supported in the client. This is optimizing for showing a client-native user interface, a user interface that feels native to the client and not necessarily to the home server. Let's just jump a little bit ahead and see how it looks like on the new authentication stack. So I'm going to do the same thing, but this time on beta.matrix.org, which is running this new authentication stack. Here I'm just greeted with two buttons, a continue and create account button. I want to create an account. I'm going to click on this. And here I'm heading to a complete new web page that is on beta.matrix.org, and with a very simple form by asking me for a username, an email address. I'm going to do that. And again, very helpfully, my browser is giving me the option to generate a strong password and save it for me. So I'm going to do that. Scroll a little bit. There's this checkbox about terms of condition. I'm not going to bother reading it either here. But I'm just going to check it. And this time, the CAPTCHA is just letting me pass. Not sure what's different here, but yeah, let's just click continue. I'm now getting also something to verify my email. This time it's asking me for a six-digit code. So I'm going to pull up that email, copy up that six-digit code, paste it, and that's it. I created my account. Now I'm getting to this screen. This screen is telling me that element that is on app.element.io wants to access my account. I'm not sure I understand everything that's on here for now, but I'm just going to click continue. And same thing here. I'm, in the end, greeted by the element home screen. Here I want to highlight one of the first issues I have with UIA, is that in UIA, the auth steps are dynamic. And if you want a good user interface, it should be included in the spec and supported by clients. This means that introducing new steps is a bit of a hard thing, because that means that existing clients should do the work to support those, and it also raises the bar for new client implementation each time we introduce something. There is a fallback mechanism in UIA, but honestly, if you dug into that, it isn't enough. It doesn't work well for native client. It doesn't work well for mobile, and it also doesn't provide the coherent design you would expect from it. And just in general, dynamic user interfaces are hard. So Element could have done the work to combine all those three steps in a single screen, but it can't predict beforehand what steps are going to be presented. So the client can effectively just do a best effort thing to display those steps, which in the current implementation means multiple screen, a lot of friction here. Let's continue my user journey by trying out a new client. So I've learned about the Matrix ecosystem, the fact that I can actually use different clients. So a friend of mine told me about Fluffy Chat, so I want to try that. I'm going to try that with my new account, the one on beta.matrix.org. Here, when I click next, oh, it's on the same computer, so I'm already logged in. So let's pretend it's a brand new device and I'm not logged in, so I'm gonna click sign out. I get this very simple login form, and the password I just saved earlier is presented to me, and I just touch my fingerprint scanner, and that's it. I just logged in again. So again, this consent screen, it says fluffychat.im wants to access your account, and it tells me what kind of access I'm currently giving to the client. And if I click continue, I get to my new account. Let's compare that to the experience with the current stack. I'll do that now with my regular Matrix.org account. Click next. I get this username and password field. It looks great because it looks native to the client. But one thing is that now my browser isn't suggesting me the passwords that I saved earlier. So I will click manually to the password fill button, the little key here, only to discover that my browser was actually looking for a password for Fluffy Chat, which makes sense. I'm currently on fluffychat.im. And so that's one of the that's a second issue I have with UIA, is that credentials are essentially bound to the domain. So your credentials, they are supposed to be bound to the service you're using, not the client. So in the current way of doing things like password manager, they don't behave well. And about the CAPTCHA earlier, the reason that CAPTCHA was particularly picky with me is that CAPTCHA was configured for matrix.org, not app.element.io. So obviously, reCAPTCHA thought something was weird going on and really required me extra steps there. But I'm a smart user, so I can find my account in the password manager, and you see here that effectively my browser saved this password for app.element.io. So I'm going to fill that, and hold on. I'm not on fluffychat.im. I was on another domain. So I just handed out my credentials to a third party that I'm not trusting. And that's the third issue I have with UIA, is that we are effectively giving full access to the user credentials to every single client we're using. So are the sensible, the destructive actions UIA is supposed to protect really protected? Because on matrix.org, those endpoints are just protected by, you need to resubmit your password to achieve them. So the client could have just easily just saved this credential, saved this password, and reuse it again, and effectively lock me out of my account. It also means that it's technically not possible to design something that gives restricted access to the client. We can't design an API where we only give read-only access to your rooms, or to a subset of room, or to a specific room type. Just focusing on those three issues, I have the magical solution for all this. And this is what this talk is about. If we authenticate the user by redirecting them through the system browser, it fixes all of this. For the dynamic authentication steps, this is something that now the server can present any kind of browser-based UI here, and they can build UI that is specific to their needs, and that's what effectively I've just shown on beta.matrix.org. Because credentials are bound to the domain, here, if we redirect to a URL that is controlled by the service, the credentials we're entering here are effectively bound to the domain of the service, not the client anymore. And usually when you do a redirection like that, it's very opaque for what's happening for the client. The client can't reach out within the web page to observe what you're doing, even on mobile. So the client can't get your password or other kind of credentials like that. Matrix already has a way for you to log in through the browser. This is called m.login.sso. It's very simple. Basically, the client redirects to a web page that is controlled by the home server to start the authentication. Then the home server does anything it needs to authenticate that user. This is defined by the spec. And at the end of it, it redirects back to the client with a single use code. The client then just has to exchange that code to get an access token and access to your Matrix account. It's a really simple yet powerful mechanism. So we could stop there and just extend that. We already have authentication through the browser in the Matrix API. But sorry to break you the news on this, but m.login.sso is basically a very limited version of the auth2 authorization code grants. So talking about auth2 is the industry standard it's an authorization framework developed by the IETF through various RFCs. And you also have OpenID Connect, which is a set of specification giving an identity layer on top of auth2, which is intended to help with better interoperability and is developed by the OpenID Foundation. Those two things are just building blocks. You can pick from them, and the idea for us is to build a profile on top of them and define what home servers and clients must support to be compliant to the Matrix spec. And it's also the question on how we use those building blocks and map existing Matrix concepts with them. I'm not going to get through all the existing RFC, but know that all of the spec already cover many very different use cases, from browser-based flow to authorization through a different device to kind of service account or bots use cases. Enough talking about spec. Now let's talk about the implementation. I spent quite a lot of time, Element spent quite a lot of time on a new part of the stack called Matrix Authentication Service. So what is Matrix Authentication Service? I think essentially the first thing that comes to mind for me now is that it's essentially a rewrite from the ground up of whatever Synapse was doing for its auth logic. It really replaces a part of Synapse, and it had a focus from the beginning on really providing a good authentication and authorization UX for the end users. It's also designed in a way where we could use it with other home server implementation if they're interested, but right now it's focusing on Synapse. The main user flow is browser-based, as I demoed earlier. So even if you're not using a company IDP, a company SSO, it is useful because password managers just work. And as we saw earlier, the registration flow is just delightful. It just works. We're also taking the step to get a bunch of things that were that the client was doing before, like managing your session. It's now concentrated in a dedicated UI to do things on your account. So manage your existing session, manage your password and stuff like that. So it also provides this account management UI. It's also designed to just work out of the box with most existing clients. So it supports both the legacy m.login.sso flows, as well as the new auth2-based flows. So in both cases, I have an example here of a screenshot on both Element X and Fluffy Chats. Element X is using the new auth2-based flow, whereas Fluffy Chats is on the m.login.sso flow. In both cases, we can tell to the user what redirect URI was being used, as well as what access you're currently granting to your account. But in addition, on the auth2 one, we have actually rich metadata about the client to show to the user. Things like the logo, the name of the client, and also maybe links to the privacy policy and the terms of services of the client if it has one. This is just one of the many protocol improvements over m.login.sso. So just looking at user experience, this new auth-based flow can do things like return to the client with an error. So if the user chooses to cancel the flow, the client is not just left hanging, waiting for the user to come back. It's also possible to start the flow with different intents. So I can, if I know that my user wanted to create an account, I can start the flow with this intent, but also instead of just logging in. And just on the protocol itself, on the security side of it, it's also a lot more strict and a lot more secure. Essentially, it first strictly checked that the redirect URL that the client is using is the one that it was advertising at the beginning, which helps protecting against any kind of redirect hijack. So if something on your system is catching the redirect back to your clients, your session is still safe. You're not going to hand out access to something else. It also opens up possibilities with it has scoped access token from the beginning. So we now have a way to specify during the login flow only a subset of access to the account and not full control over the whole account. So the key takeaways here, just in terms of protocol, of the protocol changes we're proposing. First, we think that authenticating through the browser makes sense. And for the reason I laid out before, that many credentials are domain-bound, and currently having each authentication step handled by the client effectively really doesn't scale well. Second, we're moving Matrix to use an auth system that is based on auth and OIDC specification. UIA was probably a good idea at its time, but it's really too complex in practice, and auth is really giving us major building blocks to replace this. And this also comes with this fundamental realization that Matrix isn't an authentication protocol. It was not meant to be. You need it for the ecosystem. You need it to work, but it's not supposed to be a significant part of the spec, and it currently is. On Matrix Authentication Service, this piece of software is a complete rewrite from the ground up of the whole authentication stack. This has been an opportunity for us to really rethink how user logins, how we manage sessions, how we manage devices, everything. And we've put a lot of care and a lot of effort in this. It's meant to replace a part of Synapse. It's not just an OpenID Connect provider. You can't really expect to just use an off-the-shelf OpenID Connect provider, connect it to your Synapse, and it just works. It's not the intent here. It's currently a little bit rough to run, but it's possible. And we're currently working hard to make it easier to run. The end goal of this is to make it just a part of Synapse. And so one day, you're going to get upgraded to this new auth stack by just upgrading your Synapse home server. If we talk a little bit about MSC, all of this is contained in, this is the umbrella MSC, the MSC that explains why we're doing this and points out to different small subsets, smaller MSC that focuses on very key parts of this whole proposal. If you want one MSC to read, it's this one. If you don't really care about the technical details, this one has really the motivation behind this project. And aside from this MSC, if you're a client developer and want to actually implement the thing, I suggest looking at those two MSCs. 2964 is the one that explains you basically how to do the login, and 2966 is the part where your client tells about itself, sends its client metadata to the server. There's also 2965, which is interesting to know about the server itself, and 2968, which is just setting the base for scoped access. It doesn't yet define any restricted access, but it's the base for more things forwards. Then we also have a bunch of MSCs that are here to fill in the gaps to support the existing ecosystem. Probably the more interesting one is 4911, which introduces a way for your client to deep link into specific account management pages on your home server. There's a lot of things we can go and do in the future, and one of these very futuristic MSC that we have with this work, that my boss really loves talking about this. You might know him, he's called Matthew. It's a mechanism that lets you do with a single QR code scan, log into your account and set up end-to-end encryption, set up the verification between your devices. It's really a good way for users to hop between devices like that. There's a lot of things we haven't yet explored. I have rough idea in my mind how that would work, but we are trying to not break everything at once. But it's like an exceptional opportunity for widgets, for example. Now that we can give restricted scopes, what if we thought as widgets as just being regular Matrix clients that have restricted access to your accounts. Same goes for application services. We could replace the current authentication mechanism between your home server and your bridge that are currently like just shared secrets with good asymmetric keys and leverage some of the other primitives we have in OAuth for that. And in general, right now, as I said, we only define basically one scope, which is full access to your accounts. I'm really interested now that we've done the basics, how the future looks like to give restricted access to your accounts. Should we have a way to only give read-only access to the account to a specific room, to a specific room type? I'm not sure how it looks like now. It's just possible now, which is really exciting for me. So, can you have it now? Can I just install it and basically where we are at? Currently, there's a bunch of things that is just ready. Matrix of Service supports Synapse. It has a migration tool, a very basic migration tool, but it works to import existing data into MAS. I also spent quite a lot of time recently to polish the MSCs, and I think they're now in a form where it's comprehensive, and you can start looking at them to implement either server implementation or client implementation. We also have a solid documentation for Matrix Authentication Service. There's a step-by-step guide explaining how to deploy it. As of a few months ago, we also have almost all the features needed for local password accounts. So historically, people would just use Matrix Authentication Service because it was the only way to use element X if your home server was using an upstream OIDC provider. But in reality, if you adopt MAS today, even if you're just using local password, the experience is way better for the end user because of the just the password manager argument for me is very big for the end user. You can try it out today on beta.matrix.org. I mean, we deployed it a few weeks ago. It's not exactly stable. That's why it's called beta, but it works. And it's also available for Element customers, the customers of the Element Server Suite, as of the latest version that came off a few weeks ago. What I'm currently working on hard is, now that the MSCs are ready, we really want to get them accepted. So we're going to go through the FCP process, and we're working hard to get that through. There's also a bunch of features missing for home servers that have open registration, like for users to be able to deactivate their accounts, for example. And all of those features are needed if we ever want to migrate matrix.org. And that's another thing we're focusing on right now, is also figure out the roadmap and how we go ahead and migrate matrix.org to the new authentication stack. And for that, because matrix.org is quite big of a server, we obviously need to work on better migration tools. So that's going to also improve a lot in the coming weeks or the coming months. We're also missing a bunch of features, quality of life features that are needed for people using Matrix for bots or automation, and that's also something we need to figure out before migrating this home server. What's not exactly ready yet is if you're using any of the community deployment tool, I'm not aware of any of them having an option to deploy MAS, whereas it's the Ansible playbook, the Helm charts, I don't really know yet. Same goes for the existing server admin tool. So obviously the admin APIs to manage users are different with MAS, and so existing tool like the Synapse admin UI is not yet adapted to this. We also have a few things to fix so that encryption for application services works. So one of the recurrent stopgap we get from people trying to use MAS is they want to use MAS, but they can't because they have enabled end-to-bridge encryption on the bridges. As far as I'm aware, we're also the only home server implementing this is Synapse through MAS, and obviously we would like other home servers to implement the same APIs. As I said earlier, most of the existing clients should work, but ideally we would like them to also move to this next-gen OAuth APIs, because that's really the way forward for the whole ecosystem. So if you want to get involved in the project, know a little bit more about it, I really suggest you reading this MSc, because that's the one where it's probably going to get the most heated debates on it, because it's really more the high-level concept why we're doing this. I also encourage you to check out OIDC.com that I just updated with a really shiny client implementation guide that is really guides you through the core API to implement a client that leverages this new API. I'm also pretty active on this channel, matrixauth.matrix.org, where I'm really happy to see people use Matrix-Auth service, be excited about it, and I usually do a good job at trying to help them run it. Of course, the Matrix-Auth service itself is available on GitHub, and we're very happy to receive any contribution there. And if you're if you don't know Rust and don't know how to contribute there, there's one really easy way to contribute is that all the account management interface you've seen, they are all translatable. So if you can speak many languages, go there and you can contribute localizations there. And that's about it for me. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. And yes, we have a couple of minutes left for questions.
So as an author of a non-web client, I don't quite get the argument that authentication through a browser is a great idea, but having said that, having browser authentication in Synapse has been even worse idea, so I'm definitely sure that's the step in the right direction. What is the future for the project in general? Okay, we are introducing OIDC framework into Matrix as a whole. Matrix authentication service, what is happening with it? Because this becomes basically yet another place where authentication, therefore sensitive operation, is carried out, and it requires quite a bit of attention. It requires maintainability. So what is the roadmap?
That's an interesting question. I think that's it might have been one of the reasons why we choose to make Matrix Authentication Service a standalone project, is that it's really helping to think authentication as its own thing, and we can really think about it really in detail, and which is instead of like slapping something on top of in Synapse directly. On the long term, maybe Matrix Authentication Service itself, it's just maybe the code base is just going to merge within Synapse. That's a possibility, because we also had other projects where we gradually introduced Rust within Synapse directly. The long-term goal here is Matrix-Auth Service to really live within Synapse and be transparent to the operator. So the concern of having multiple component touching off isn't really one here, I guess.
Well, if you're bringing it to Synapse, then if you're bringing it to Synapse, then we basically again are sitting with something web-based inside the inherently back-end system, because Synapse is not supposed to provide like any web serving pages. It's just historically has been such that we are providing feedback page here, feedback like fallback page here, fallback page there, but it never belonged to it.
Yeah, but often the matrix authentication service has been designed for it. And when I'm talking bringing that to Synapse, I'm not talking about re-implementing it in Synapse. I'm really talking about doing FFI binding so that Synapse calls directly in process, use matrix authentication service as a native module for Python.
Do you have a rough estimate when the migration or the merging of matrix authentication service to Synapse will be started or completed?
It's already hard for me to know what I'm going to work on 6 months ahead, but I guess it depends on the real need for it. It also depends on we still have a lot of problems to figure out, and if you currently have a way to run matrix of service in Synapse, it's a bit hard, but it works. So it might not just be like the #1 priority. It's like a goal in long term. I can't really give you a timeline yet for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question? Okay, is that it? Oh, one last.
Yeah, so the implementation from element X and single sign-on, do you have any time frame for that?
You mean implementing the legacy m.plugin.sso?
Yeah.
I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think there's ElementX doesn't want to implement that new API. The goal is to only implement the new auth2-based ones, because we really think that the benefits are way better in terms of security of the protocol itself. That it doesn't make sense to implement more to invest more time on the legacy offlow.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much again, and we continue.